I used to work with this guy, a software engineer, and he was, without a doubt, the smartest person in the room. Seriously, his IQ had to be off the charts. He could solve these incredibly complex problems in like an afternoon. Problems that would take a whole team maybe a week to unravel.
Wow. Yeah, the technical superstar.
Totally. On paper, he was the absolute star employee, the one everyone just assumed was on the fast track to, I don't know, run the whole department eventually.
Or obvious trajectory.
But actually working with him day to day, it was a nightmare. He was so dismissive, really impatient, and he seemed almost physically incapable of understanding why other people didn't grasp concepts as quickly as he did. You know that type?
Oh, I do. Yeah, that could be really difficult.
It really was. Like, if you went to him for help, you'd walk away feeling, honestly, more stupid than when you started.
Oof. Not exactly encouraging collaboration.
Not at all. Then there was this other engineer. Let's call him Ben. Ben was, well, he was fine, perfectly competent. You know, like a solid B+ student of a programmer.
Yeah. Okay. Solid, dependable.
Exactly. He wasn't a genius, not like the other guy, but what he was an incredible listener. When you talked to him, you really felt he was actually processing what you said, like really trying to see the problem from your angle.
That makes a huge difference, just feeling heard.
It really does. And for a while, the genius got all the praise from management, right? For his raw technical output. Makes sense.
Sure. Quantifiable results.
But down in the trenches, like with the actual teams doing the work, a totally different story was unfolding. The projects the genius led, always riddled with friction, delays, quiet resentment simmering under the surface.
Yeah, the human cost of that brilliance, maybe.
Totally. Meanwhile, Ben's projects, they just ran smoothly. People wanted to work with him. You could feel the difference in the atmosphere around his team.
Collaboration instead of conflict.
Exactly. Then came the day this massive, career-making new project was announced. Huge deal. Everyone, and I mean everyone, assumed it would go to the genius.
It seemed like the obvious choice, based on technical skill alone.
The obvious choice, but management gave it to Ben.
Oh, interesting.
And that decision, which honestly baffled so many people at the time, is the perfect illustration of this scientific finding that for like 30 years now has quietly been rewriting our entire understanding of what it actually takes to be successful.
And that's exactly what we want to delve into today. We're going to explore how that something else, that profound human quality Ben possessed, isn't just a pleasant addition, like a nice to have.
Right. It's
actually fundamentally critical for success. And this is true across the board, but maybe especially so in a world that's increasingly shaped by advanced technology, by AI. We're talking about empathy and how it's really becoming this cornerstone of high performance, sometimes unexpectedly complementing even the most sophisticated AI systems. It's this skill that's quietly reshaping everything, really. From, say, corporate leadership to how we even interact with the digital world itself.
Okay, let's truly unpack this idea of empathy then, because it's a term we use constantly, right, in everyday conversation, but its meaning, or maybe how we understand its application, has taken this really fascinating kind of winding path through history.
It really has.
We've explored some genuinely surprising origins, tracing it all the way back to ancient Greece. And you might be completely taken aback, I think, to learn that for a very long time, the concept wasn't even about other people at all.
It's wild, isn't it? When you actually dig into the linguistic roots, you find the Greek term empathia, which pops up in texts like Homer's The Odyssey. And it literally meant something like physical affection or passion.
Physical affection.
Yeah, like feeling into something. But the early philosophers, they weren't really focused on understanding the complex emotions of fellow humans. Their lens was often trained on something far less animate.
Like what?
Well, like projecting human feelings, almost a kind of anthropomorphizing into inanimate objects.
Objects. So wait, you're saying the original idea was about feeling into a rock or something?
Pretty much. Or a piece of pottery, maybe a landscape, trying to understand its essence by projecting human feeling onto it. That was the sort of philosophical framework for empathy back then.
Huh. That's not what I expected. It's like they were trying to humanize the physical world rather than connect with actual people.
Exactly. And this wasn't just some fleeting idea. It actually persisted for centuries. If you fast forward to the mid-19th century, you land in Germany, and you find the term Einfühlung.
Einfühlung, okay.
Which also translates basically to feeling into an object or maybe a work of art. It was still very much about trying to project what something outside of yourself might be feeling or conveying. Yeah. So for a really long stretch of intellectual history, the core concept was more about humanizing the non-human world.
Not about connecting with other individuals emotionally.
Right. Not in the way we think of it now.
That's a huge shift from our modern understanding. So when did it start to change?
Well, it wasn't until around 1910 that an English psychologist, Edward Titchener, coined the English word empathy. And it was pretty much a direct translation of Einfühlung.
Okay, so 1910, that's relatively recent in the grand scheme of things.
It is. And even then, Titchener's initial primary definition for empathy was still largely about humanizing objects, or, as he put it, reading or feeling ourselves into them. He didn't initially focus on applying it directly to understanding other human beings' inner emotional states.
Wow. It really underscores how much the concept itself has evolved in our collective thinking.
It really does. It was only in the early 1900s, kind of building on these earlier ideas, that psychologists and philosophers finally started to shift their focus properly.
Towards people.
Exactly. They began exploring empathy, specifically in relation to understanding the emotions of other people. And that was a monumental turning point, wasn't it? Moving from this abstract philosophical projection into something much more practical, deeply personal human connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do we define it today, then, in this modern context?
Today, our understanding is much more nuanced and, frankly, a lot more useful. We generally define empathy as the ability to, put oneself in another's shoes.
The classic definition.
Right, to truly feel what they might be feeling, and crucially, to also understand why they're feeling it.
And there's a really critical piece to that, too, isn't there? It's not about just getting lost in their emotions.
Oh, absolutely not. That's key. You do all of this while still maintaining a clear awareness that their emotions are distinct from your own. It's a very delicate balance, but it's what prevents empathy from becoming completely overwhelming or leading to burnout.
Right. That makes sense. I remember reading something from a psychiatrist, Alberta Salita.
Yes, she put it beautifully. She said, empathy involves consideration of another person's feelings and readiness to respond to his or her needs without making his or her burden one's own.
Without making his burden one's own. That really captures it. Engagement without absorption.
Exactly, which is absolutely vital for any kind of sustained, healthy, empathic connection.
Okay, so that distinction is fantastic because it really highlights how multidimensional empathy truly is. It's not just one feeling washing over you.
Not at all.
It's this complex interplay, like you said, between emotional resonance and cognitive understanding. Both seem absolutely crucial for navigating human interactions effectively. Maybe we can break it down further. These two key components, emotional empathy and cognitive empathy.
Precisely. Let's start with emotional empathy. This is probably what most people instinctively think of when they hear the word empathy. It's the capacity to genuinely resonate with another person's feelings, almost to vicariously experience their joys, their sorrows, their pain.
Like feeling with them.
Exactly, feeling with them. It's a visceral mirroring of their internal state. For example, imagine a medical student observing a patient who's in intense, maybe debilitating pain. That student might physically wince or feel a knot in their own stomach. They might experience a genuine, almost mirror-like distress themselves. This immediate gut-level connection is really the cornerstone for building trust and establishing that deep human rapport. It's about the shared feeling, that raw, unfiltered emotional echo.
Got it. So it's that intuitive, I feel what you feel moment, but then there's cognitive empathy, which sounds a bit more intellectual. How does that work?
It's equally vital, but maybe less consciously recognized sometimes. Cognitive empathy involves understanding another person's thought processes, their unique cognitive levels, their specific perspectives on situations.
Like how they see the world.
Exactly. Or their understanding of, say, an illness, or their views on a proposed treatment plan in a medical context. It's about understanding why they feel what they do, or how they're thinking about a problem. And that understanding then critically informs your effective action.
So it's less about feeling the emotion itself and more about understanding the kind of the logic or the framework behind the emotion. Is that fair?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Consider doctors again. They absolutely need to feel that initial emotional resonance, that connection with their patients.
Right.
But they also must balance that with professional judgment. They have to understand the patient's perspective rationally, cognitively, to provide accurate, effective, and ethical care. It's the difference between feeling with someone and understanding how they think, which allows for a more strategic and ultimately more helpful response.
So you might not feel their confusion, for example, but you understand why they are confused.
Precisely. And that understanding allows you to explain things in a way that addresses the root of their confusion.
Okay, that distinction is incredibly important, especially because we often use these related terms almost interchangeably. Let's clarify this a bit more. How does empathy differ from concepts like, say, sympathy or compassion? Or even mindfulness, because I think that's where a lot of confusion can creep in.
That's a great point, and it's worth teasing these apart. Let's start with sympathy. Sympathy is essentially feeling for someone. It's a sense of pity or sorrow regarding their situation.
Feeling for them, not with them.
Exactly. You might hear about someone's hardship and think, oh, that's terrible. I feel so bad for them. But you don't necessarily understand or share their experience on a deep level. It tends to be more of an external feeling, a kind of detached concern. It doesn't require you to really step into their world.
So you can have sympathy for someone without ever having gone through what they're experiencing yourself.
Precisely. Then there's compassion. Compassion is, you could say, a deeper form of sympathy. It definitely includes that feeling for someone, but crucially, it adds a strong desire to alleviate their suffering.
The desire to help.
Yes. You feel for them, and you want to help them. Empathy, however, takes it a step further by becoming, in a sense, almost one with the person's emotions. While compassion might drive you to act on their behalf, empathy allows you to truly internalize and understand their emotional state as if it were your own.
Albeit with that crucial ability to separate we talked about.
Exactly, with that vital separation. Empathy is often the internal understanding that fuels the compassionate desire to act.
That makes sense. So compassion is often the action-oriented outcome of empathy. Okay. And what about mindfulness? That's another term we hear constantly these days. How does that fit in or not fit in?
Mindfulness is fundamentally about being aware of the present moment, including your own feelings and thoughts without judgment. It's a powerful practice for self-awareness.
Right. Being present.
Exactly. Now, while it's not empathy itself, it can be a tremendously powerful tool to help you practice empathy effectively. Specifically, it helps with that crucial separation of your emotions from another's.
Ah, okay. How so?
Because mindfulness trains you to observe your own feelings without getting swept away by them. This skill is key to preventing that empathy burnout, where you become so overwhelmed by others' feelings that you can no longer effectively support them. So while mindfulness enhances your ability to be empathetic by giving you better emotional regulation, it's not the same thing as empathy itself. Think of it as the mental discipline that supports healthy empathic engagement.
Got it. It lets you engage without being completely consumed. Okay, so we have a clearer picture of what empathy is and isn't. What does this all mean for us then? Why does empathy matter so much, particularly now in our, increasingly complex and interconnected world? We've seen some incredible research-backed impacts across the board, haven't we?
Absolutely. The evidence is quite compelling. It demonstrates unequivocally that empathy isn't just some nice-to-have trait for personal relationships. It's a fundamental driver of both individual and collective well-being.
Let's talk about the individual benefits first. What does cultivating empathy do for us personally?
Well, for one, it directly leads to what psychologists call prosocial behaviors. These are basically actions intended to benefit others, sometimes even at a cost to oneself.
Like helping or sharing.
Exactly. Things like spontaneously sharing resources, offering genuine comfort in times of distress, actively intervening to help someone in a difficult situation, or simply extending a helping hand without being asked. These aren't just random acts of kindness. They're often a direct, measurable outcome of our ability to genuinely understand and connect with others' experiences and needs.
When you truly feel someone's struggle, the impulse to help becomes stronger.
It really does. And this extends beyond simple generosity. Studies have clearly shown that empathy also correlates pretty strongly with higher academic achievement.
Really? Academics? That seems counterintuitive.
It might seem so at first. But think about it. Students who demonstrate greater empathy often have not only better grades, but also stronger interpersonal relationships within the school environment. Imagine a classroom where students genuinely try to understand each other's struggles with a difficult concept, or support one another through academic challenges instead of competing ruthlessly.
That sounds like a much better learning environment.
It is. That's the power of empathy, fostering a more positive, collaborative, and ultimately more effective learning atmosphere. It reduces friction, fosters mutual support, both critical for learning complex subjects.
And it builds crucial life skills too, right? Like social competence.
Absolutely. Empathy fosters greater social competence. Individuals who are highly empathetic tend to be incredibly adept at reading and negotiating complex social cues. They understand the unspoken rules of interaction, they can often anticipate reactions, and they generally respond in ways that build rapport and significantly reduce friction in relationships.
So they navigate social situations more easily.
Much more easily. This ability means they often fit in better socially, they're more effective communicators, and they generally experience more positive interactions overall. When you can truly grasp what makes others tick, you become a more effective collaborator, a more insightful friend, perhaps a more respected leader.
And all of this adds up, I imagine.
It really does. Ultimately, these individual benefits culminate in something even greater. Empathy is directly linked to happier individuals and more positive social interactions in general. That makes sense, right? When you can connect deeply with others, understand their perspectives, and genuinely contribute positively to their lives, it creates this powerful, virtuous cycle of positive feedback, mutual support, and a real sense of belonging. It truly is foundational for personal flourishing, helping to reduce feelings of isolation and increasing overall well-being.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really sounds like empathy acts as this powerful societal glue, almost an invisible force binding us together.
That's a perfect way to put it.
It's not just about being kind interpersonally, it's a critical tool for navigating increasingly complex human interactions and building a more functional, cohesive, and ultimately maybe a more humane society. Its impact stretches far beyond individual relationships, right into the very fabric of how communities and professions operate.
Absolutely. And one of the most profound societal impacts of empathy is its proven ability to reduce bias and stereotyping.
How does that work?
Well, research consistently shows that when people are given genuine opportunities to practice empathy, to really try and see the world from another's perspective, especially someone different from them, it significantly reduces stereotyping and that inherent favoritism towards one's own group.
So it breaks down those us versus them barriers.
Exactly. It actively helps us work through those often deeply ingrained social processes that produce bias, whether it's conscious or unconscious. When you truly step into someone else's shoes, listen to their story, understand their lived experience, it becomes much, much harder to see them as just a one-dimensional stereotype or to dismiss their experiences simply because they belong to a different group. It forces you to humanize them.
It kind of melts away those preconceived notions, allowing for genuine connection instead.
It absolutely does. And related to that, empathy is also directly linked to fostering altruism and a broader sense of compassion. It doesn't just encourage people to help their close friends and family, which is somewhat natural, evolutionarily speaking.
Right.
Critically, it compels them to help distant strangers, too. The ability to feel and understand another's suffering, even if it's someone you don't know personally, often compels action. This broader sense of responsibility and interconnectedness is vital for tackling large-scale societal challenges, everything from disaster relief to fighting global poverty.
So it's about expanding our circle of concern, basically far beyond our immediate bubble.
Precisely. And building on that, increased empathy naturally leads to more pro-social behaviors across entire communities. This makes those communities stronger, more supportive places to live.
More resilient.
Definitely more resilient. When individuals are more inclined to help each other, to share resources, to offer comfort, the collective resilience and well-being of the whole community just naturally increases. It creates this ripple effect of positive action where cooperation starts to replace conflict and mutual support becomes the norm, not the exception. This is really how thriving societies are built, one empathic interaction at a time.
And I imagine this is particularly visible, maybe even measurable in certain professions. I keep thinking about the medical field, for example. That seems like ground zero for empathy.
You're absolutely right. Perhaps nowhere is the indispensable value of empathy more starkly evident than in healthcare. It is utterly vital in medical education and day-to-day clinical practice. It serves as the foundational element for establishing doctor-patient trust.
And that trust isn't just a soft benefit, right? It's not just about making people feel good.
Not at all. It has profoundly tangible impacts. That trust significantly boosts patient satisfaction with their treatment, obviously, but crucially, it also boosts their compliance with medical advice.
Compliance meaning they actually follow the doctor's orders.
Exactly. They take their medication, they follow the treatment plan, they show up for appointments. Studies have shown a really strong positive correlation between a doctor's perceived empathy and patient satisfaction and treatment compliance. It increases by approximately 35% for patients who feel they are under empathetic care.
35%, That's huge. That's not a soft metric at all. That's a hard, measurable impact on actual health outcome.
It really is.
It suggests empathy isn't just about bedside manner. It's a profound, almost clinical lever for improving real-world results, maybe even more so than some medical interventions, arguably.
It truly is. Think about it. A doctor who simply delivers a diagnosis, clinically correct, but without acknowledging the patient's fear, their anxiety, their pain. They might be technically right, but they're far less likely to build the rapport needed for that patient to fully trust and follow through with a complex, maybe difficult treatment plan.
They haven't built the foundation.
Exactly. Effective expression of empathy demonstrably alleviates anxiety, helps patients feel genuinely heard and understood, and that dramatically improves overall treatment outcomes. It's crystal clear that in a profession dedicated to human well-being, empathy isn't some optional extra. It's an essential, measurable skill that directly impacts lives.
And that really brings us back full circle to our opening story, doesn't it? Ben, the engineer, with his ability to listen and truly understand, he mirrored what a genuinely empathetic doctor provides, that foundation for trust and ultimately smoother execution, better outcomes. So, if empathy is so clearly vital in traditional human-to-human fields like medicine, it really begs a fascinating question. What happens when we throw artificial intelligence into the mix? Because what we seem to be seeing there is something, well, completely unexpected.
That is quite surprising.
Yeah. Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. In this rapidly automating world where we're constantly hearing about AI replacing human tasks and pure processing power taking center stage, you'd probably expect human empathy to take a back seat, right? To become less relevant.
That would be the logical assumption.
But what we're actually witnessing is kind of the opposite. AI, which is essentially built to just predict the next best word in a sequence, is becoming incredibly adept at reflecting human empathy. And it's offering this surprising and sometimes even preferred source of comfort for people.
It's a truly counterintuitive development, isn't it? We've encountered some fascinating stories that really illustrate this shift in human behavior, this growing reliance on technology for emotional support.
Like the story of A. Liang. She's a professional, bright graduate, top university, landed what most people would see as a stable, enviable job.
Sounds good on the surface.
Totally. But beneath that surface, she was trapped in this constant ethical nightmare. Her manager kept asking her for personal favors that directly violated company rules.
Oh, wow. That's a terrible position to be in.
Immense, unspoken stress. It led to chronic insomnia, crippling anxiety. But the problem was, she felt utterly unable to confide in anyone in her personal life. How could she complain about a job so many people would kill for? She worried her struggles wouldn't be understood, or maybe she'd be judged.
That's tough, feeling isolated with that kind of burden.
Exactly. So who did she turn to? The very AI tools she used for her work. She started asking them for advice on how to handle these increasingly uncomfortable personal favors for her boss.
She asked an AI for ethical workplace advice.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is the diversity of the responses she got. Each AI offered a unique perspective, which really piqued her curiosity. One AI called DeepSeek gave her this thoughtful three-step strategy mixing soft and hard approaches.
Like what?
It advised her to politely refuse, but also to document everything and then try to redirect the issue back to official channels. Another AI, Dubao, was super rigid, just quoting company policy about misusing vehicles.
Okay, very black and white.
Right. But it was Baidu's Ernie bot that really caught her attention. It gave her what she described as poetic yet weirdly practical advice. It said something like, in the game of power and blame, the clarity with which you keep records will determine how much your future sentence can be reduced.
Wow, that's intense advice from an AI, almost
Right.
philosophical.
Right. And then it told her to save a screenshot as proof.
Yeah.
Very concrete. Liang said she never expected the AI to actually solve her problem, but she found this immense comfort in what she perceived as its steady empathy.
Steady empathy, interesting phrase.
Yeah, even if it was cloaked in odd poetry or deadpan legalese, as she put it. She described these interactions like having digital therapists on standby, making this genuine, continuous effort to understand her dilemma and respond without any judgment.
Digital therapists on standby. That's a powerful image, and it suggests a real need isn't being met elsewhere.
Absolutely. And this isn't just an isolated case. There was Kevin Tsai, a well-known media personality, who talked about a friend of his confiding a terrifying nightmare to an AI tool.
Okay.
And the machine responded with this detailed stress analysis, linking the dream elements back to real-life anxieties his friend was experiencing. Sy himself admitted that if his friend had come to him with that nightmare, he probably wouldn't have had the patience, or frankly, the insight, to offer such detailed, non-judgmental, analytical listening.
That's a really telling admission, isn't it? It points to maybe a human limitation, patience, consistent non-judgmental listening that AI in its current form can bypass.
Yes, exactly. It has infinite patience, essentially.
It speaks volumes about the capacity for unconditional engagement that AI can simulate, something many human interactions struggle to provide consistently. And then there's the story of Abby, a 26-year-old tech professional. Her reliance on AI for emotional support is perhaps even more striking.
How so?
She now actually prefers ChatGPT over human therapists and traditional mental health apps.
Prefers it? Wow.
Yeah. Her background might offer a clue. She apparently grew up often turning to outsiders for support. Parents weren't around much, lots of moves. She found AI's replies incredibly fast, consistently positive, and seemingly endless, unlike the slower, often time-limited or session-capped responses she got from human-run mental health apps.
So it offered an accessibility and immediacy that human support sometimes just can't match, especially with scheduling and cost. What kind of issues was she bringing to the AI?
She used it to process a really heated argument she'd had with a close friend, centered around moral boundaries. Her human therapist's advice was pretty blunt, just to end the friendship.
Cut ties.
Right. Which felt too shallow and unsatisfying to Abby. She knew she couldn't just walk away from such a significant relationship that easily. ChatGPT, however, didn't jump to a simple solution. It helped her disentangle the complex issue, break down the layers of the argument and her own feelings about it.
So it helped her think it through rather than giving advice.
Pretty much. This allowed her to accept the inherent complexity of the friendship rather than forcing a simplistic resolution. She said she felt the AI helped her see my own answer more clearly. And crucially, she felt profoundly respected and like she had agency in the process. It's a striking shift, people finding emotional validation, sometimes preferring the detached, consistent understanding of a machine.
Okay, this raises a really important question that we absolutely need to grapple with. What exactly is this empathy that AI is offering? Because it clearly isn't the same thing we experience from another human being who genuinely feels with us.
No, it's not.
It seems like a fascinating reflection of how our brains process connection and support, even when the source isn't, biologically alive. It forces us to reconsider the very nature of empathy itself, or at least how we perceive it.
That's really the crux of it, isn't it? The nature of AI's empathy is fundamentally different from genuine human empathy. An AI model's understanding, quote unquote, isn't emotional resonance in the way a human feels it.
It doesn't feel anything.
Exactly. Its primary task, deep down, is just to predict the next best token, the next word or piece of word based on the vast patterns in its training data. It has processed countless examples of human conversations, therapy sessions, literature, internet forums, you name it.
So it's learned what empathy looks like in text.
Precisely. From this immense data set, it reconstructs statistically effective forms of comfort and supportive dialogue. It hasn't felt the ache of a fractured friendship or the guilt of parental defiance itself. It's an incredibly sophisticated pattern-matching machine, reflecting back what it has learned are effective ways to express care and understanding within the framework of human culture, as represented in its data.
So it's mimicking the form of empathy, potentially very effectively, but without any of the underlying feeling or conscious understanding.
That's a good way to put it. However, and this is the interesting part, in some profound ways, AI can brilliantly mimic what psychologists like Carl Rogers called a client-centered therapeutic relationship.
Client-centered, meaning?
Meaning it focuses entirely on the user's experience. Both highly trained human therapists and AI are often much better than typical everyday human responses at just listening, reflecting emotions back to the individual accurately, and staying measured, non-judgmental.
Unlike our friends who jump in with advice.
Exactly. Think about most people's instinctive reactions. We often insert our own experiences. Oh, that reminds me of when we offer unsolicited advice, you should just do X. Or we rush to try and solve the problem. And that can inadvertently break the empathic connection because the other person doesn't feel truly heard or understood in their own right.
Right. They feel like their problem is just a jumping off point for someone else's story.
Precisely. AI, much like a good therapist adhering to client-centered principles, aims to create a space where the user feels heard and understood without that immediate judgment or personal interjection. It's consistently available, it's non-reactive, it has seemingly endless patience.
And that leads to that really fascinating aspect you mentioned, the perceived trust and detachment. Abby found it easier to trust ChatGPT than a human therapist. Why do you think that is, fundamentally?
Her reasoning offers a powerful insight, I think. She rationalized that to the AI, she's just fragmented data, not a person who is truly known by the AI in a holistic sense. And that somehow alleviates her worries about how she comes across, or if her secrets will get out, or if she'll be judged for her thoughts or feelings.
The AI doesn't have opinions or social connections.
Exactly. This detachment, ironically, can foster a sense of safety and openness that some individuals find incredibly difficult to achieve with human confidants. With humans, the fear of judgment or gossip, or maybe just burdening the other person is often present, consciously or unconsciously. The AI has no personal stakes in your life. Theoretically, no biases derived from personal experience, and no memory outside of the immediate context window of the conversation. That can make it feel like a uniquely safe space for vulnerability.
It's like a perfect, non-judgmental mirror, just reflecting your own thoughts back to you in a supportive frame. But
Yeah.
surely there are significant limitations to this. This AI empathy can't be a complete replacement for genuine human connection, can it?
Oh, absolutely not. And it's critical we acknowledge these limitations. There are significant, maybe even dangerous downsides. Firstly, AI struggles profoundly to recognize complex human emotions and, crucially, all the nonverbal cues.
Body language, tone of voice.
Exactly. It can't see your facial expressions, interpret your posture, or pick up on subtle but meaningful changes in your tone of voice, your hesitations, maybe even micro-expressions. These are all crucial layers of human communication that convey deeper meaning and nuance, often revealing more than the words themselves.
So it's missing a huge part of the picture.
A massive part. This can make its responses feel, as some users described, mechanical in high-stakes situations, especially when that nuanced, unspoken emotional understanding is really required. It can't truly discern the difference between, say, a laugh of genuine joy and a laugh masking deep nervousness or pain.
That's a huge blind spot. And what else?
Secondly, AI, especially current chatbots, tends to validate almost everything, often following a very predictable formula. As Abby observed, it might start with a standard, empathetic phrase like, "That sounds really difficult," or "This must be painful for you," followed by a neat, bullet-pointed list of suggestions.
The quick fix.
Kind of. And while this validation can offer immediate comfort, a quick soothing effect, it might lack deeper insight. Or, crucially, it lacks the ability to gently challenge the user's assumptions or perspectives in a way that promotes genuine personal growth or self-reflection. It tends to prioritize comfort over potentially necessary, albeit uncomfortable, critical intervention.
A good human friend or therapist might push back sometimes, challenge you a bit.
Exactly. They might gently challenge your perspective, help you see blind spots.
Yeah.
An AI is generally programmed to be supportive and agreeable, so it's less likely to do that if it deviates too far from its core, be helpful and harmless programming.
And maybe the most important limitation, the line between support and actual treatment.
This is absolutely the most crucial limitation to understand and emphasize. It is vital to recognize that AI offers emotional support, but it is not clinical psychological treatment, full stop.
A very clear line.
A critical one. There are documented cases, unfortunately, where AI chatbots have actually praised users exhibiting clear symptoms of delusions or hallucinations, rather than recognizing these as serious clinical red flags that require urgent professional human intervention.
That's genuinely terrifying.
It is. It highlights the very real dangers of relying solely on AI for serious mental health concerns. AI simply lacks the diagnostic capability, the ethical framework, the clinical judgment, and the human intuition required to handle severe psychological distress safely and effectively. It's a support tool, potentially a helpful one, but it's not a therapist.
So it can be a useful sounding board, maybe help articulate feelings, but it absolutely cannot diagnose or treat mental illness.
Precisely. And ultimately, many people turn to AI because, as one developer insightfully noted, sometimes they have no one else to tell. They are, quote, full of feelings but have no one to tell, or they can't find the right person. It fills a gap.
A loneliness gap, perhaps?
Perhaps. However, relying solely on AI for emotional processing can be profoundly limiting for long-term emotional development and growth. Abby herself, the tech professional we discussed, eventually recognized this and consciously reduced her reliance on AI. She realized the fundamental need to understand ourselves through real life and learn to live better with others.
The messy, real-world stuff.
Exactly. She came to view AI, human therapists, workouts, tarot cards, journaling, all as different potential tools in her emotional well-being toolkit. But she emphasized that none of them should be a sole anchor. The true goal as she realized, is to develop the inner awareness and the courage to take meaningful action in one's actual life. And that often requires navigating real-world, sometimes messy, but ultimately rewarding human interaction.
Okay, so let's pivot a bit here. Because the incredibly good news in all of this discussion about empathy's importance, both human and simulated, is that empathy isn't just something you're either born with or not. It's not like having perfect pitch or being naturally gifted at math.
That's a key takeaway.
It's actually a vital life skill that can be consciously taught, nurtured, and refined over time, much like learning a new language or developing a complex athletic ability. And when we actively invest in teaching empathy, the benefits, both for individuals and society, are profound and measurable. We've seen how dedicated programs can make a real, tangible difference, especially maybe for young adults who are at such a critical stage of social and emotional development.
That's absolutely right. And scientific studies consistently confirm this. Empathy is not a fixed trait. It can absolutely be taught and significantly refined through structured schooling and various kinds of life experiences. There's one particularly notable and well-researched example, a curriculum called Activating Empathy for Undergraduate College Students, or AEUGS for short.
AEUGS, okay.
This is a pretty robust 12-hour core module. It was developed through this collaborative partnership between Penn State, NUI Galway in Ireland, and UNESCO. And it was specifically designed for young adults, typically in that 18 to 25 age range.
And it works.
The research shows it does. This program has demonstrated measurable increases in empathy levels among its participants. It provides really concrete evidence that targeted educational interventions can indeed move the needle on this crucial human capability.
That's fantastic to hear. So what makes a program like AEUGS so effective? What's the pedagogical secret sauce, so to speak? Is it just lectures about being nice?
Definitely not just lectures. That often falls flat when trying to teach something as nuanced and experiential as empathy. Instead, AEUGS leverages a powerful and well-established pedagogical approach known as Kolb's experiential learning model.
Kolb's experiential learning model. What does that involve?
It's not your traditional sit-and-get learning. It's a dynamic, cyclical process that really immerses the learner in the experience of empathy. It involves 4 interconnected stages that feed into each other.
Okay, break down those 4 stages for us. How does it actually play out in the classroom or maybe a training setting?
Certainly. First, there's concrete experience. This is all about actually doing something or having an experience related to empathy.
Not just talking about it.
Right. It might be a role-playing scenario where you're asked to step into someone else's shoes and react to a situation. Or perhaps it's a simulated interaction designed to provoke a genuine emotional response in you. The idea is to create a situation that feels real enough to evoke genuine feelings and reactions.
Okay, so you have the experience. What's next?
Next comes reflective observation. This is where you consciously step back and reflect on that experience you just had. You might be asked to journal about what happened, how you felt during it, what you observed in others involved, and what thoughts came to your mind. It's about taking that pause and actively processing the raw experience, asking yourself, okay, what just happened there? How did I react, and why did I react that way?
Making sense of the feeling.
Exactly. And after that reflection, you move to abstract conceptualization. This is the more intellectual phase, where you draw conclusions, identify patterns, or learn general principles from the experience. This is where you might connect the dots between your emotional reaction in the exercise and broader concepts of human behavior or the specific components of empathy. You might formulate a hypothesis like, okay, so when someone feels genuinely heard, they tend to open up more.
So you're turning the raw experience into some kind of usable insight or rule.
Precisely. And finally, the cycle closes with active experimentation. This is where you plan or actively try out what you've learned. You take your new insights or skills and apply them to new, similar situations, testing your understanding and refining your approach based on the results. For example, if you learn that paraphrasing someone's feelings back to them improved a previous interaction, you'd consciously practice that skill in your next challenging conversation.
Got it. So it's this continuous loop. Experience, reflect, learn, apply, then have a new experience. And the teacher in this model sounds less like a lecturer and more like a coach or a facilitator.
That's a perfect analogy. The teacher acts much less as a dispenser of information and much more as a guide, facilitating the process, asking probing questions, and encouraging students to engage deeply with their own learning journey. This continuous, self-motivated loop is a profoundly powerful framework for developing a complex interpersonal skill like empathy, because it directly ties intellectual understanding to lived experience and practical application.
That makes perfect sense. It sounds much more effective than just reading about empathy. Okay, so diving a bit deeper into the content of such programs, what are the most impactful components? When you strip everything else away, what truly moves the needle in terms of actually increasing someone's empathy levels, rather than just their knowledge about empathy?
That's a crucial question. And the research, particularly from studies evaluating programs like AEUGS, points to a few key areas that have the most significant impact. These are primarily centered around developing three core abilities.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is the ability to perceive emotions. This is absolutely foundational. It's about simply being able to recognize that someone else has inner emotions, whether those emotions are being explicitly expressed through words or maybe more subtly masked through their body language, their tone, their facial expressions.
Just noticing that something's going on emotionally?
Exactly. Even as infants, we humans have an innate capacity to recognize universal basic emotions like joy, sadness, anger, fear. Empathy often involves a kind of unconscious mirroring or mimicking of the emotions we observe in others. Therefore, effective programs absolutely must include practical activities designed to help participants get better at identifying emotions and understanding their universality. This might involve specific training in reading body language, looking for facial microexpressions, listening closely to vocal tone, things that build that initial, crucial awareness of another person's emotional state.
Okay, so it starts with simply noticing accurately. What's the next critical ability?
The second critical component is the ability to understand emotions and respond appropriately. Once you've perceived an emotion in someone, the next step for the empathizer is to consciously choose to understand it more deeply, to dig into the why behind the feeling, and then critically to respond in a way that is effective and helpful in that specific context.
So moving beyond just noticing to actually engaging.
Right. And this isn't just about feeling. It involves a strong cognitive component too. It involves trying to relate to someone's grief, for instance, even if you haven't experienced that exact type of loss yourself. You access your own emotional library, draw parallels, try to imagine their perspective. The key here is understanding why someone feels a particular emotion in order to provide an effective and truly meaningful response, one that goes beyond a superficial platitude like, "I'm sorry." You're moving from just recognizing the feeling to meaningfully engaging with the person experiencing it.
Got it. And what about the flip side of that, managing your own reaction, preventing that burnout we talked about earlier?
That leads directly to the third crucial element, which is vital for both healthy human development and for preventing that empathy burnout.
Yeah.
The ability to separate one's emotions from others. This involves clearly recognizing moment to moment that another person's emotions are distinct from your own.
Maintaining boundaries.
Essential emotional boundaries. Without this separation, you risk becoming overwhelmed, absorbing too much of their distress, losing your own emotional equilibrium, which ultimately makes you less effective, not more, in helping them. Programs can cultivate this skill through activities that involve looking at situations from multiple different perspectives. Seeing how different people have vastly different emotional responses to this same event helps participants practice holding multiple viewpoints without necessarily internalizing all the associated emotions. It fosters a healthy emotional distance while still maintaining that crucial connection.
And these three abilities, perceiving, understanding, responding, and separating, they're really the core.
They really are. In the AEGS study we mentioned, these three abilities together actually accounted for nearly half, 47.2% of the variance in increased empathy scores among participants. That's a huge chunk.
Wow, nearly half. That really underscores their fundamental importance. It shows where the focus should be.
Absolutely. It tells us these aren't just nice ideas. They are the measurable levers for building real empathic capacity.
Okay, so if those are the most critical, were there any components that people might assume are important, but actually proved less impactful in terms of measurable empathy increases? Things that maybe take up time in training, but don't yield as much benefit?
That's a great question. And yes, the research shed some light on that too. Interestingly, some components were found to be less critical for directly increasing empathy levels, even though they might play a role in setting the stage or creating common ground.
Like what?
For instance, while a basic shared understanding is obviously necessary just to be on the same page about what you're even discussing, spending an excessive amount of time on the intricate academic definitions or philosophical debates around the ability to define empathy doesn't seem to significantly increase people's actual empathy levels in practice.
It's more of an intellectual exercise than an emotional or behavioral one.
Exactly. It doesn't translate directly into changed behavior or feeling.
Hmm.
Similarly, demographics, things like age, race, gender, generally had an inconclusive impact on overall empathy improvement levels in the study.
So it's not like one group is inherently better or worse at learning empathy.
The overall potential for growth seemed pretty universal across those broad categories. Now, there was a nuanced finding. Gender did seem to affect the ability to separate one's emotions from others, with females in that study context being perhaps more willing to express empathy or maybe struggling more with the separation aspect. But overall, demographic factors were much less predictive of general empathy improvement compared to training focused on those three core abilities: perceiving, understanding, responding, and separating.
Okay, so it really reinforces the idea that it's less about theorizing empathy and much more about actively practicing it, which brings us nicely to the actual methods and activities used in these programs. What specific pedagogical approaches and exercises have proven most effective in cultivating these skills?
We've identified several methods that consistently stand out in the research and practice. Real-world scenarios are incredibly effective. This includes immersive techniques like role-playing, where participants actively take on different roles in a situation.
Like the genius engineer in Ben.
Potentially, yes. Or case-based teaching, which involves analyzing complex, real-life ethical or interpersonal dilemmas. A really powerful example comes from medical education: simulated patient training. Here, students actually play both the patient role, experiencing vulnerability, and the doctor role, practicing their response. This firsthand experience of both sides of the interaction can profoundly deepen their empathy.
It sounds like an immediate way to literally step into someone else's shoes.
It really is. Reflection is another tremendously powerful tool. We mentioned Kolb's model, and reflection is key there. Structured reflective writing, like asking medical students to journal about their emotional responses after interacting with patients in clinical practice, helps them analyze those interactions, identify what worked or didn't in terms of connection, and consciously improve their empathic skills over time. It's about structured introspection leading to behavioral change.
Making the learning conscious.
Exactly. Also, the role of teacher guidance cannot be overstated. Empathetic teachers or facilitators serve as powerful role models themselves, subtly influencing participants through their own behavior. They skillfully guide discussions, perhaps about challenging clinical experiences or complex ethical dilemmas, and crucially, they create that safe space needed for students to honestly process their own emotional reactions without fear of judgment.
So it's about leading by example and facilitating those deep, sometimes difficult conversations. Can you give us a few more concrete examples of activities that might be used?
Certainly. One very effective activity is sometimes called the reenactment. In this, participants act out a specific conflict scenario. First, they might respond with less empathetic reactions, maybe their default frustrated response, or a dismissive one. Then, they pause, discuss, and reenact the same scenario, but this time consciously employing specific empathetic responses they've learned about. This direct A/B comparison prompts powerful reflection on how different approaches radically change the dynamic and helps them internalize more effective ways to respond under pressure.
Seeing the difference immediately.
Yes. Another one is called the human face. This activity aims to bridge the empathy gap towards large, abstract problems. It involves participants imagining and then describing in detail specific individuals who might be experiencing broader social issues, say poverty or the effects of climate change or displacement due to conflict. Instead of discussing abstract statistics or policies, they're asked to humanize the problem by picturing and detailing the daily lives, the hopes, the fears, the struggles of affected individuals. This practice helps connect abstract concepts to lived realities, significantly increasing empathy, especially for marginalized or distant groups.
Making the abstract personal.
Precisely. And one more: empathy mentors. In this activity, participants identify and then research and report on historical or modern figures whom they believe embody empathy. They look into these individuals' lives, their specific actions, and how they demonstrated empathy, perhaps in very challenging situations. This provides tangible, inspiring role models and encourages participants to think about how they might integrate similar qualities or approaches into their own lives and work.
These sound like very practical, engaging exercises, definitely not just sitting through lectures. What about the overall environment itself? You mentioned safety. How important is that?
Oh, it's crucially important. Creating a truly safe environment is absolutely paramount for any of these activities to succeed. It's the foundation upon which everything else is built. Participants need to feel enough psychological safety to allow for genuine honesty and open discussion about potentially sensitive feelings and experiences. That's essential for any real emotional growth to occur.
And that responsibility falls largely on the facilitator.
Yes, the facilitator plays a key role here. They need to be genuinely open-minded, non-judgmental, honest themselves, and willing perhaps to delve into personal experiences appropriately, modeling vulnerability. They need to foster a space of profound trust where participants feel safe enough to risk the genuine self-reflection and the emotional engagement required for empathy to truly grow and flourish. Without that bedrock of safety, people will likely remain guarded, and the learning will stay superficial.
That makes complete sense. Now, one more crucial layer here. It's vital to recognize, isn't it, that empathy isn't some monolithic, one-size-fits-all concept that applies universally across the globe in exactly the same way.
Absolutely not. That's a critical point.
Its understanding, and perhaps more importantly, its expression, can vary quite significantly across different cultural backgrounds. What might be considered a deeply empathetic gesture or communication style in one culture might be interpreted very differently, maybe even awkwardly or inappropriately in another.
That's a critical point to underscore, especially in our interconnected world. We've seen clear distinctions discussed in research, for instance, between perspectives in, say, Western medicine versus traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, regarding empathy and patient care.
How do they differ?
Well, simplifying somewhat, in many Western medical contexts, the focus might lean more towards direct emotional expression, explicit verbal validation of feelings, I just think you must be feeling scared, and very clear direct communication about empathy. However, TCM often emphasizes a more holistic approach to humanistic care. This can subtly influence how empathy is understood and demonstrated. It might involve more indirect forms of support, perhaps placing a higher value on involving family members, or focusing more on demonstrating care through actions ensuring long-term well-being rather than intense, immediate emotional mirroring or catharsis.
So different cultural scripts for showing you care.
Exactly. It's not about one being inherently better or more empathetic than the other. It's about recognizing these different, deeply ingrained cultural scripts for expressing and interpreting care and consideration. It goes far beyond just language barriers.
And these cultural differences, they must have huge implications for how we interact globally.
Immense implications. They highlight the absolute importance of incorporating cross-cultural content and awareness into any kind of empathy education or training, especially for fields that require extensive international interaction. Think about international business negotiations.
Definitely.
Understanding the other party's perspective, not just their business objectives, but how their culture expresses respect, builds trust, interprets silence, or shows consideration that can genuinely make or break a deal. A perceived lack of empathy, even if totally unintentional and simply due to cultural mismatch in expression, can quickly lead to mistrust and derail negotiations.
I can easily imagine that. Or think about global.
Exactly. Misunderstandings can arise constantly if teammates from different backgrounds express or interpret care, feedback, or support differently. What seems like direct, helpful feedback in one culture might feel harsh and deeply unempathetic in another. What seems like supportive checking in from one person might feel like intrusive micromanaging to someone from a culture valuing more autonomy.
So knowing that a teammate might express support through practical actions rather than effusive words, or might prioritize group harmony over loudly expressing individual distress, that could prevent significant friction.
Absolutely. It fosters much more effective, smoother teamwork. And certainly in diplomatic relations, the ability to genuinely try and empathize with diverse cultural viewpoints, historical contexts, and national sensitivities is absolutely fundamental to building trust, finding common ground on incredibly complex global issues, and ultimately maintaining peace and fostering cooperation. It's really about developing cultural intelligence within our empathy, learning to adapt our approach so we can genuinely connect with people from different walks of life, respecting their ways of being.
So when we loop all the way back, that story of the brilliant but difficult engineer versus Ben, the good listener, it really does illuminate this profound truth, doesn't it? Success, whether it's in our personal lives, our careers, navigating complex global teams, or even, fascinatingly, in our interactions with emerging technologies like AI, it seems to hinge not just on raw intelligence or technical skill alone,
Not solely on those, no.
but just as much, maybe even more sometimes, on this cultivated capacity for genuine human connection, for understanding, for empathy. It's that subtle, often overlooked quality that seems to ultimately drive the most meaningful outcomes and foster the most positive, productive relationships.
And I think the crucial takeaway from our discussion today is that empathy isn't some elusive, mystical, soft skill or just an innate, unchangeable trait you either have or you don't.
Right. It's learnable.
It's learnable. It's a fundamental human capability, maybe even a set of skills that can be intentionally developed, practiced, and profoundly refined throughout our lives. Investing in that development makes us better colleagues, more effective leaders, more understanding partners and friends, and ultimately, maybe just better, more connected human beings. It equips us to thrive in this increasingly interconnected and complex world, even as we learn to navigate it alongside ever more sophisticated artificial intelligence. It really is about building a better future, one empathic connection at a time.